5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to SAHDPod Live, where we might be sads, but at least we aren't sad bastards. It's October 19th, 2017. The sads and former sads joining me on tonight's show are Mr. Keith Johnson.
Hello.
Is that all you got?
That's all I got.
Okay, and Mr. Brett Roberts.
Yeah, how's it going, eh?
Welcome. This is actually going to be our first... Is this our first interview show? I think it is our first interview show with Mr. Brian Gordon, the creator of Fowl Language Comics, or more colloquially known as the Duck Guy or the Dad Hero or whatever. Anyway, he's the man who channels our rage and anxiety through his comics. So thanks for joining us, Brian.
Well, thank you for having me. Lovely to be here.
The check's in the mail. Brett and Keith, before we go to Brian proper, guys, big comic book fans? Keith?
Yes, I was more of the comic book type of guy.
Did you read the Funnies though?
I did. Calvin and Hobbes. I loved Calvin and Hobbes growing up. He was, whenever I drew as a kid, that's what I always copied, Calvin and Hobbes.
And what about you, Brett? Did they have that up in Canada?
Yeah, we used to get a big rock that they drew on, and the polar bears came by. But Calvin and Hobbes was a big one for us. I used to love Far Side was another big one, and probably Family Circus I used to like way back in the day was kind of what I can remember really reading. And I did have a few Garfields and Heathcliffs kicking around.
Fucking I hate Garfield. And I used to read that too. Now, obviously we're all fans of Brian's because we see it, we see people steal his work and present it to us so that we don't actually have to pay for it all the time online. Look, I've heard you talk about you wanted to be a syndicated cartoonist from a very young age. What are your influences, Brian? I mean, what were the strips that shaped your humor and why?
Well, the very first one was Peanuts. I started copying that out of the newspaper as a kid. That's how I cut my teeth in the comic world, so to speak. I wasn't into sports at all. My dad was terribly uncoordinated, and he passed everything he didn't know about sports on to me. So I had a real... just kind of indoorsy kid life, so I just kind of spent a lot of time entertaining myself, copying pictures out of the funny papers. So,
did you cut them out and put them on your wall, that sort of thing?
Oh, sure. But it was just like the daily routine was, like we'd get the newspaper in the morning, back when there was newspapers. Then I would just go to the funny section and just start copying pictures out of the funny papers. And Snoopy was my favorite, and so. At the time, probably in the mid to late 70s, because I'm old, there was a interview with Charles Schultz, the guy who drew Peanuts, and he basically was doing an interview, and this is at the height of his fame, so he was on all the TV shows and such, and he was just saying, like, I'm a syndicated cartoonist, and I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll do that too. It just seemed like, oh, well, if he does that and I like drawing his stuff, then I'll just do that too. So around 6 or 7, I decided I was going to be a syndicated cartoonist, and I stuck to that more than I should have. It had all the conviction of like any other kid who wanted to be an astronaut or a princess or wizard or whatever the hell you want to do. But I was like, oh, I'm going to be a cartoonist. But like, unlike other kids that, grow out of being, a wizard or whatnot, I just stuck to my guns, and to the extent that, people are like, oh, now it's time to learn math. And I'm like, oh, no, I don't have to do that. I'm going to be a cartoonist. And cartoonists don't have to know how to do math or type or read or anything. It was just, I just focused from then, it became my default thing. It's like, do I need to know how to do that to draw little anthropomorphic animals in a box? No? Well, then I don't need to learn that. Thanks so much. So I was a pretty stupid kid, which now I'm just a stupid grown up, but
What were the cartoons that Schultz, I mean, I always remember The Great Pumpkin, and I remember reading it in the little books, and it would bore the shit out of me, The Great Pumpkin. And I'd always try and flip through that bit, and I'd like to get to Snoopy and the Red Baron. But is there any that you remember to this day?
They all kind of blend together, but the actual comics themselves, I mean, the Great Pumpkin is just kind of a super weird one, but they were just kind of, there was a real darkness to them. Like if you really get into them, I mean, you read them now and they're not like super laugh out loud funny, but if you read through them, there's just like this kind of solemn darkness to it, which I don't, in a weird way, it was kind of neat where like, you know, everything else, it wasn't so super gag oriented. Sometimes it would just be kind of this quiet kind of like a melancholy. I don't know. It just appealed to me in a weird way as a sad melancholy kid where I'm like, yeah, I get it. I'm like, Charlie Brown, he's my guy. Though,
did you get the psychiatrist thing? Lucy being the psychiatrist? I mean,
oh sure. Yeah. You know, all that sort of thing. I mean, that was like, you know, what I cut my teeth on, but I think at the time it was also just kind of Snoopy was cute and I was a little kid. But the thing that really like made my head explode was The Far Side when I was, you know, probably like a tween or something, where I saw that and it was just like the clouds parted and the hand of God came down. I was like, oh shit, like that, there you go. That's the stuff. That's funny. That's amazing. So that's what really set my world on fire. And at the time it was Calvin and Hobbes, Far Side, Bloom County. It was just like this little trifecta of amazing comic strips out there, and it was just like, yeah, it just was like, you know, the golden age of comics in the newspapers, and it was just like, yeah, this is totally what I want to do. And then by the time I got good enough or old enough to do it, like newspapers started going away and became like impossible to get into them, and so that's why I'm online, not in newspapers. So
Brett, you got something?
I was just gonna say, I'm just trying to picture Fowl Language Comics on the Sunday paper.
It would have to be a lot less foul.
I was going to say, would it exist? Do you think in the days of print?
It could. I mean, you know, at its heart, you know, it's, you know, a family strip, but it would have to be, you know, neutered to a fair extent, because, you know, you can't drop F-bombs in the Sunday paper. I mean, you can, you know, newspapers are read by a much older crowd, so they're often much more sensitive to language and, you know, topics and whatever. So, you know, it's a sort of thing like,
that's why there's no rap in the seniors home.
Yes.
Oh, how do you know? How do you know? Have you been into a senior's home? But you went to Boston for school, right?
Yes, I went to undergrad at Massachusetts College of Art, and then graduated and made fives upon fives of dollars freelancing. And then after I decided I needed to get out of my parents' basement, so I went back to school. I figured I'd get my master's and teach other kids how to make fives upon fives of dollars. And so I got my master's in Syracuse, upstate New York. And about halfway through the program, I was spending my summers doing like the most horrible bullshit, horrible blue collar, horrible jobs. And I got the opportunity to do an internship at Hallmark, of all places, in Kansas City. So first I had to look up where Kansas City was and where Kansas was. As a Massachusetts person, I had no idea. And as a stupid person, I had no idea. So I looked it up and like, oh, okay. And like, I can spend 3 weeks there. That's cool. That's better than, you know, like working in a factory or driving medical specimens around Massachusetts or any number of other horrible jobs I had. So I did an internship, and at the end of the summer, they offered me a job, much to my surprise. And so I figured like, oh, well, maybe instead of teaching, I'll do that for like a year or two, and then I'll become rich and famous and then move to the coast and get a sweet teaching gig and, you know, retire and, you know, whatever, my palatial estate, blah, blah, blah. 18 years later, I got laid off. I never got around to getting rich and famous, and here I am today. So, yeah, it's been kind of a crazy.
When did you graduate?
I graduated from Syracuse in 97.
Okay,
yeah, 97.
I just started my uni career in 97 at 26. And that was the time of the T1 internet connection, and everybody was watching Joe Cartoon, and Joe Car was making big bucks. Do you remember that?
You know, I never watched Joe Cartoon. I didn't know that.
But he was driving a Hummer, and everybody was. And I was just wondering, did you notice that things were going online? And there was another one, Duty.com. I mean, obviously it's pretty basic humor. But I was just wondering, did you see that start of internet, famous cartoon thing happening then?
I was honestly pretty late to the internet comics world. It wasn't until later on. It was funny. I was at Hallmark, and I was doing cards for their humor line, which is Shoebox. So we had this project where they're like, okay, well, we're trying to be more relevant, and we want to be, what are the kids into? Whatever. So it's like, okay, let's see. And we started looking at like, what are the popular humor trends? And so I researched, and it was only at that point that, I knew some of the big ones out there, like XKCD and some other ones, but it wasn't until I really went like this deep dive into like, what's out there, that I discovered this whole world of webcomics. And I'm like, holy shit. And I was reading, I'm like, this is really some funny stuff. So it just kind of piqued my interest. Like, I'm like, wow, maybe I should get in on this world of webcomics somehow. And I'd been doing stuff for the blog at Shoebox. I did a comic called Chuck and Beans for, about 6 or 7 years, maybe. And, that did pretty well, relatively speaking. And it was one of the bigger things that they had online. But they never knew what to do with it because, of course, Hallmark is all about, moms, grandmoms. And, this comic was about these 2 young single guys who are into video games and stuff. And they just like, we don't know what to do with this. And it's like, well, it's popular. They're like, yeah, but this isn't for grandmoms. And so it was just kind of like, so I'm like, well, what do you want to do? They're like, well, you're doing it for free, right? I'm like, well, yeah. And they're like, keep doing it by all means. So I'm like, all right. So like, we own it, but you just keep doing it for free, and that seems like a pretty good deal for us. I'm like, oh, okay.
Because you don't own any of that, do you? That's all Hallmark?
No, that's all Hallmark. So, which is kind of a shame because, that's every once in a while I'll see it get passed around again or something, like some old comic for back in the day. And I'm like, yeah, I made that. Don't own it. It's like, so, it was fun. It was a good way to teach myself how to cartoon at home and do something regularly without like an editor or anything. So,
but then you moved to Ducks.
Yeah. And then,
and that blew up on Reddit, right? Was it Reddit or something?
Yeah. Reddit is where it first kind of, took hold. Everybody asks like, why Ducks? And in hindsight, if I had known it was going to be my career, I may not have chosen it. It was just like, at the time, it seemed like, it'd be the sort of thing like, why did you eat at McDonald's? I'm like, I don't know, I was hungry. I was just next door. It wasn't like, I didn't know I'd have to eat there forever. It's just so I had been doing this comic. I was getting burned out, and I'm like, I need to do something that's more about, like, the comic that I was writing, Chuck and Beans, was about these 2 young single guys with no kids. And I was, married with children, and that was my whole world. And I was like, I can't write for these 2 characters. And I just can't relate to these guys anymore. So, I was like, I just start something new. But at that point I was getting jaded, and like, if I do something else for Hallmark, they're going to own it. They're not going to do anything with it. Just like the first thing. So I'm like, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to do it for me. So, but there was all this talk, around Hallmark, like, oh, you have to be careful because you sign all these like super onerous non-compete clause contracts where, like, if you sneeze, Hallmark owns it, like whatever. So it's this sort of thing, like, so I was like, oh God, I'm like, well, I don't want them to own this, I'm working there, but I'm like, I'll be doing this in my own time. So I'm like, I have to make something that they won't want. So the very first comic I did, I'm like, so first it was in my sketchbook, and I was drawing like, how am I going to do? I got to do something they won't want. And I came across this doodle, and it was a doodle of a duck. And he just, a little word balloon above his head, and it just said, fuck this. And underneath it, it said foul language, like FOWL. And I'm like, well, yeah, it was just like a little something I drew up while I was talking on the phone or something. And I'm like, oh, foul language. Yeah, that's dumb enough to be a thing. I'm like, I'll probably make 3 of these. So I'm like, whatever. So I'm like, I'll draw ducks. So the very first comic I did, I dropped like 8 F buttons, like fuck, 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 fuck. And I'm like, come on, Hallmark, you want this? I'm like, it's mostly fuck, but it's all yours if you want it. So, and of course they didn't want it and they never asked for it. But so I did that, and then it started to kind of catch on some of the Reddit on their comics and web comics pages. And yeah, it just started slowly building, and just started getting a foothold.
Did you have a strategy for Reddit though? I mean, because Reddit, obviously, I mean, I'm aware of it, but I'm too old for it, and I'm assuming that you're.
Yeah, no, I'm too old for it too. Basically, the way I tell, like, I get baby cartoonists ask me for advice and stuff, and I always tell them, like, well, Reddit's a great place to go, but it's kind of like, imagine doing stand-up in like the drunkest, most vile, horrible nightclub you can imagine, where you get up there and like, hey, everybody, how you doing? And everyone's screaming like, fucking kill yourself. That's like that's the Reddit crowd, is that you're like, I made something for you. And everyone's like, we hate you. And so you just have to like, yeah, I made a pretty drawing, and like, we still hate you. And so, but you just kind of throw it up, and and 90 times out of 100, it just gets downvoted to hell. But there was a few that just kind of like, I just kept posting them, and there was a few that, people were like, no, I guess it's okay. And then a few like started getting upvoted, and then, a couple of them started making the front page of Reddit. And then, I started getting noticed by, other websites that started picking up and reposting my stuff. And yeah, it's crazy. It's a very kind of insular community, and it's a harsh crowd to try and break into.
Now, were they all sweary when they first went on it?
No, I mean, there was a lot more swearing in the beginning. Like, I still, drop a good shit, or that came out the wrong way. I'll still use, profanity here and there without thinking twice about it. But at the time, I was just being at Hallmark for nearly 2 decades and stuff. I was like a teenager who figured out how to swear for the first time or something. I was just like, wee, just like, I can say anything and no one can stop me. So it was, it used to be a little more foul, but I worked some of that out of my system. So now I just use it a little bit more judiciously.
Our podcast is like that. We started off clean though. Now we've got Brett.
Well, fuck you. When you first started posting to Reddit, you said you get like so many negative comments. Now, how do you want to keep posting and keep writing and keep putting that stuff up for fodder when you're getting hit with all these negative comments? You're getting hit with a lot of, it would push a lot of people down that would not want to come back and do it. How did you kind of push those first ones out, get hit, and then continue to want to put it out there till you started getting, a bit of mileage out of it?
The theory, or at least the myth behind Muhammad Ali, is that maybe he didn't throw the hardest punch, but he could take endless punches. And that's the sort of thing, like, after trying and failing for so many years, I just had a really thick skin, where it's the sort of thing where people are like, you suck. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I hate me more than you do. What else? It's like, and it's just sort of thing like, yeah, I know. Some people like my stuff. Some people hate it. And that's the sort of thing, like, if you're going to do anything creative, and it's either you have to like believe in yourself, or you just have to ignore it. And I don't know if it was more believing in myself or more just ignoring it and just being stubborn about, like, I'm just going to keep trying. And it was sort of thing where you'd have to just laugh, because I'm like, it's a duck comic, and then it's like you're getting really upset about a duck comic that you read for free. It wasn't like I'd charge you $100 and made you sit and read a novel. I'm like, this is a single panel duck comic, and it was free, and I'm sorry you didn't like it. Yeah,
are you allowed to use a Muhammad Ali reference, since that you're not into sports? I mean, I was just wondering, because you must have read that somewhere, right?
that is the
is that the extent?
I do watch some documentaries here or there, but that's about the end of that will probably be the last sports analogy you'll hear me ever make. But it's the sort of thing where I just like, yeah, I can take a punch, at least online. In real life, no, I'd go down like a a pile of twigs. But online, I've give me what you got. I've heard worse. So
Ever comment back at these guys, or do you ever throw some punches back, or do you just simply just keep going and don't even look at them?
I learned pretty early on that it's the sort of thing where, like, if you say you're in like a really bad part of town and you get surrounded by a mob, and somebody is like, "We're gonna kill you," and you'd be like, "There's no chance." If you're like, "No, I'm gonna kill all of you," like that's no, you're gonna get your ass kicked. So it's a sort of thing like getting surrounded by a mob, and then they're like, "You suck," and you're like, "Yeah, I know." Like, yeah, it's kind of funny, but I appreciate the input, and people are like, "I don't know how to compute that. Why aren't you angry at me back?" So it's a sort of thing where I would just kind of try and friendly engage people, and people would just like get confused and thrown off. And if you think you hate me, like, I've been loathing myself since forever. So I mean, there's nothing you can say to me that I haven't already said to myself, and worse. Nowadays, if someone gets upset at me online, fortunately there's enough fans that if someone is just like picking, a fight or starting some shit or going off on a tangent that has nothing to do with like the intent of the comic, then, there's enough other people that will jump in and get mad at them for me. And I can kind of like, oh, okay, well, what he said, without actually stepping into the fray and kind of encouraging the trolls any further to like, ooh, we're just going to keep commenting and making him mad because we know it'll get a rise at him. I can just kind of sit back and they can fight with somebody else. And
so you've never thought about putting one of your one of your big trolls into any of your comics?
I've written comics about trolls, but I haven't like, oh, douchebag 39, whatever, like, and I've never like, there's never been a specific person that's ever made
gotten the wrath.
It. Yeah, that's ever gotten there, because that would be like their best day, like this, like, ooh, I'm famous now, like, ooh, I really got under his skin that he had a whatever. But yeah, there's but it is funny, like, I wrote a cartoon recently about Nazis, which, and I usually try and stay above the fray, like I try not to get political. I mean, I definitely have my political leanings, but it's a sort of thing where I'm like, okay, it's a comic about parenting, and I'm not trying to, so I try and stay on topic as much as I can, but I'm also writing about stuff in the world. So I'm like, okay, my kids are living in a world where Nazis are marching and stuff. And so I'm like, okay, like, so I was figure out like, how do I comment on this? And so I had some kind of like thoughtful, somber sort of takes on like, oh, well, the world is cruel and we're going to try and be good and blah, blah, blah. And then I just was getting frustrated. The more I was reading, I was just getting mad. I'm like, well, I don't want to just be a rant. And like, rants aren't funny. So I just went back and forth, and I ended up, I just wrote that basically it's the dad duck talking to his son, and he's saying, well, the stuff that comes out of a dog's butt, and the kid's like, yeah, he's like, that's a Nazi. And so he's like, like, so, I'm commenting on Nazis without like getting, whatever. And yet, good God, like so many people got up, like I didn't realize, oh, we can't talk bad about the Nazis. Like, no, we should be able to talk. Like, what happened? Then, like, oh, I'm alienating my Nazi fan base, and I'm like Jesus Christ.
There are some good Nazis though, from what I understand.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
I mean, not all Nazis are bad.
Yeah, it's because not everybody on that side is bad. Some are very nice, responsible people.
Very responsible. Obviously, your cartoons are cathartic. Actually, I read that was in your intro blurb in the second book that you just released. Now, to be cathartic, some of your shit must be pretty dark, right? Some of it. I mean, you must sit down and go, oh, fucking hell, I can't put that one out. Jesus Christ. Yeah. Uh-oh, not for consumption. Yeah. Do you do this?
Oh, sure. I mean, there's a lot of, I have a few close friends that I can run joke. It's a sort of thing where, I like to think that I can go to like dark places, but, it's sort of thing like sometimes there's times where I'm like, if I make that into a comic and you don't get like it could be misread or whatever, or it could be I mean, people already will read like one cartoon and just like, okay, well, this is every cartoon. I'm like, no, that was just one cartoon where I'm was especially shitting on my kids, but the next one, I'm like, raving about how in love I am with them. So, but yeah, there are ones where I'm like, maybe that'd be too dark, this sort of thing. I'm always worried that, like I'm gonna cross the line and someone's gonna think like he really does hate kids. And I'm like, no. I'm
sometimes.
Joking. Like,
just sometimes.
Yeah.
Just between 5 and 6.
Yeah, exactly. Only when I'm trying to get them to bed or get them to school or get them to stop screaming when I'm on the phone. It's only in those moments that I'm just spitting mad and cursing into my breath and whatnot. So,
because you got a lot of hate for the kids' assholes. I mean, didn't you? I mean, that was.
Yeah, I thought that the one where I was calling my kid an asshole, that was one of the first ones where I thought, like, okay, this is where it ends. This is where I'm going to get the hate mail. It ended up being one of my most popular cartoons to date. That one where I was like, wow, I'm like, okay, well, I'm like, I'm going to call my kids assholes in every cartoon if they love it this much. So, but
step it up a notch.
Cartoon? Yeah, exactly. I'm like, hey, what's your cartoon called? It's called My Kids Suck. But I did one that probably the one I got the worst reaction from was about, it was just a silly, stupid thing. It was about lying to my kids about McDonald's. And basically the gist of it was, the word balloon is like, oh no, McDonald's isn't open on Thursdays or whatever the thing. And then the caption was like, take advantage of this time. They're only going to be this dumb for a while. And, like, so it's kind of, poking fun at kids, but that the intent is that, I'm trying to keep my kids from eating, or begging for junk food, whatever. And somebody, a lengthy blog article about how I was like the embodiment of child abuse. And this is like what bad parents do. And they, they call their kids stupid. I'm like, okay, I didn't call the kid. It wasn't like, I'm like, you're stupid. I'm like, I made a joke about, how kids are unaware at a certain, like, whatever. And so she wrote this long article about how I was everything that was bad in the world. And I went over and I'm like, Jesus Christ, this is a little bit more. And there was just like all these people that are like, burn him in the comments. And I'm like, whoa. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go over there. I'm going to just kind of like, they probably didn't expect that I was ever going to find this, but here I am. So I went in like, hey guys, Brian, I wrote this comic. I'd just like to give you some background information. I'm like, if you read the greater body of my work, I'm like, I actually, really love my kids. I joke about it. I write my comics like I would be talking to a close friend, and sometimes it gets a little blue, but if it's like anything else, if you take it out of context, you might think that it's one thing, but if the larger body of the work, you'll realize that no, there's a lot of heart and love behind whatever. It's just I'm venting, and people are like, oh. Burn him! So no.
Have you been on the internet before?
Yeah, exactly. I tried, and so I went back and forth, and pretty soon my comics were getting compared to 1960s segregation, and I'm like, yeah, that I'm sure. Like, if you were to go back to Rosa Parks or whatever, and you'd be like, yeah, no, I get it. I have a web comic. No, yeah, we're on the same page here, Rosa. Me and you, we're kind of going through the same thing. It's like, no, it has nothing to do with. So yeah, I just had, after a while, I'm like, I'm just going to tiptoe away from this. These guys are too entrenched, and that's a fight I lost. So
people are willing to do it in their own name nowadays, so there is no boundary that anybody's not willing to cross. I know Keith's a bit of a cartoonist himself, or at least an artist himself. Now, you had some questions, didn't you, Keith?
Yeah, I was just mostly wondering, I like to hear about what a person's process is. Like, how do you go from your first thought of something to finished product? Like, does something happen, fuck, I need to remember this so that I can put it into a comic,
Mm-hmm. Well, for me, like, there are times where in the moment, I'm usually just too busy just dealing with the shit at hand. You know, like more times than not, it's like just me, like, you know, the kids will do something shitty and then I'm just trying to like put out that fire, literally or figuratively. And I'm just like, oh, and then it's only afterwards, you know, like my way of coping has always been, you know, like both in comics and in art and just life, you know, like if something shitty happens, you know, like whether I got dumped by a girl or, you know, like I got caught in the rain or whatever it might be, you know, I'll vent and try and joke about it with friends. And, you know, like we'll have a laugh about it. You know, that's just a coping mechanism. It's just taking whatever shitty day you had and coping with friends. And so there's a lot of times where it'll happen and I'll either, you know, be chatting with one of my friends or, you know, like, or I'll just be reflecting on my day and just thinking back and like, oh my God, I can't believe the lunchbox and the shoes and the one sock and the God damn, the fucking one sock. That's kind of funny, you know. So I'll just kind of I'll reflect, or if you know if there's nothing that just a lot of stuff like just happened that day. Like a lot of people, I'll get asked like how many comics do you work ahead? And I'm like, oh my God, if my comic goes up at 3 PM, chances are I finish that cartoon at like 2:55. So there's not a lot of lead time, but if I'm stuck, there's times my little way of brainstorming is what I do is I write a list of grievances where it's basically just like things that make me mad about children. And it's just like my little way of brainstorming where it's like, because if I wrote like things that make me happy, like things that make me happy aren't funny. Like if you know, it's the sort of thing where I tell people like, okay, like if you think of like just like a good story, like if you ask somebody how their day was and you're like, oh I got my kid to school on time and he remembered his stuff. I'm like, oh well, yeah, it's good for you. Or it's like, let me tell you about, you know, my kid's in the car and he shit his pants and it's like, oh my God, then what happened? You know, it's like, you know, it's like that's a story you want to hear. That's going to be your funny story is when your kid shit his pants in your car. So,
right. And do other people's, does that happen a lot too? Like, do you get some inspiration from other people's stories as well?
Yeah. You know, there's I would say like 95% of what I write about is direct autobiographical sort of stuff. But every once in a while, I'll be talking to someone who, you know, they'll, you know, just like anybody does, any parent, you know, you'll touch somebody and be like, oh, my kid does X, Y, and Z. And like, oh, my kid does, you know, like Z, Y, and X. And you'll be like, oh, that's kind of funny. And I'm like, oh, I could relate to that. And I'm like, maybe that didn't happen to my kid, but I could totally see how that would be frustrating. So it's a sort of thing where it's like, okay, well, maybe that didn't happen to me, but I could totally relate to that experience. Or, you know, like I'm not going to write about what it's like to have teenagers because I don't have teenagers, but, you know, it's a sort of thing like if I can like 95% of my stuff is just like reporting, you know, like from the front, but, you know, the other about 5% of it is just kind of hearsay and just like, oh yeah, this is kind of a shared experience. And this is stuff that my friends are talking about or, you know, just stuff I'm picking up on from the people I'm around. So I mean, if someone asks me or if someone tells me a story, I usually, you know, I try every time to like, do you mind if I use that? Like, I don't want somebody like, hey, that was my kid. So I usually try and clear it with them. If I, you know, if it's going to be something that turns into a cartoon, I usually try and make sure that they're okay with it.
So you steal somebody else's children? Is that allowed?
Yes. I tie them up and I feed them into the grinder and I use their precious blood and life. Yes. So.
You mentioned, I mean, Welcome to Parenting. Everybody, you know, all of us have a copy. We've all read it. Speak about them.
Oh, well,
how masochistic. Oh, well, I mean, you know, we can't exactly have you on the show and not read your book. I mean,
this is perfect for David because it's got, you know, little short frames. It's not big words. It's excellent. Mostly pictures.
I was hoping for something with less words and more visual, but you know, you do what you can. But you know, the masochistic nature. I mean, we always get sold that parenting is this, you know, amazing. I think I described it as a Rolls Royce, but it really is a boxcar with some assembly required. You know, I have one.
Absolutely.
And I had a moment where my wife and I were talking. I'm saying, my daughter, I think we should have another one. This would be really good. And then, something happened, and I thought I had a brain aneurysm. Now you've got 2 kids, so did you have a brain aneurysm, or what led to the second one? I mean, was it some other ailment?
It's funny. Because my first kid was definitely the hardest, and it was such a traumatic, horrible experience for a long time, and I read some article where supposedly, and I think this is just like hardwired in so that the race will keep propagating itself, where you just kind of, like your brain kind of erase. It's like any other horrible experience that you go through. It's like eventually your brain kind of paves over that with happy feelings and whatever. And so the sting of it went away for a bit. And so it was sort of thing where I was hardcore one and done. And then my wife at the time was just like, hey, let's have another. And I was like, no, the first one almost killed me. And so like, but wouldn't it be nice? And then there was that part of me, that whatever latent gene that wanted to keep propagating the species, like, yeah, we could have another one. And so we went ahead and made another one. And she was a lot easier in many ways, at least as a baby, and she's proving harder as she gets older. But yeah, she was a relatively easy baby. But now that she's 6 or 7, like she's spirited, as they say, which is the nice way of,
Yeah, I don't buy into that bullshit.
She's a pain in the ass.
Yeah, exactly. The nice way to describe like a serial killer.
You're
spirited.
You're amongst friends now, I mean, look, everybody who's been a parent, it's almost like a Ponzi scheme in which you want to bring the other people in and then go, ha ha, because people lie about parenting, right?
Oh yeah, of course, and initially when I was sitting next to somebody at Hallmark, and we had babies about the same time. His baby was about a month older than mine. And we would kind of compare notes, and he had the easy baby and I had, the demon from hell. And so like I wasn't sleeping, my kid wouldn't eat. My kid could, like barely roll over, and his kid is like speaking Mandarin. It's just like, oh, what? It's like they were just like a totally different plane. So, and I was just like, oh my God, I suck at this. My kid sucks. Like this, our whole family sucks. I'm like, I hate us. Like, why did we ever have a kid? But then it was like, we never got together. And then like when the kids were like a 1.5 or something, we finally, I met this child prodigy of his, and it's like, oh no, his kid's just as stupid as mine. And just like, he was just spinning this tale of, wonder and glory. Well, that's bullshit. It was like, why, here I was like hating myself, but it was just, he didn't want to confess to, all his failings. And now that's my whole career, is just confessing to my failings on a regular basis. So, but yeah, that was the thing. Partly my cartoons came out as like a cry for help, just venting like, I suck at this. And I just kept threw it out there, not knowing whether or not everybody else was going through this or not. But it was just,
it's cheaper than therapy, isn't it? I mean, especially if you don't have health insurance.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. Tell me about it. So yeah, I've been through therapy, but I have to pay a dear price for my insurance. That's a whole nother topic. But
there isn't a Reddit forum for that.
Probably that'll be my next comic strip is going to be about poverty and how I can't afford health insurance.
But the See You Next Tuesdays online that talk about all the sweetness and light and how awesome their kids are, and we read it all the time. It's either despair or it's we have none of that. Our gifted children, and we talk about it on our podcast all the time because it's just bullshit. You're a video game man, though, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so if there was a video game called Parenting, how many people would actually have kids?
I don't know. I think it would be oh God. Oh, wouldn't that be nice if you just turn it off and just come back to it when you're ready? Or like when you fuck up, you just start the level over. Wouldn't that be nice? Like, oh God, like, oh no, I shouldn't have taught them that. I'm like, oh wait, I'm just gonna reset. Oh, I get to try that over again. Okay, let me handle that situation without swearing. Okay, maybe that'll be better.
We all have those desperate times. I mean, I did a PBS thing here, and I presented myself obviously very well on PBS, and then we had to go to a bar in which I met up with some dads, and I talked about the child screaming in the car seat, that stereo blast. And I said all I wanted to do was drive into a wall so that I could fall asleep on the airbag. And now, obviously, they didn't use the audio. That's the thing. It can get desperate. Now, is it because we spend too much time? I mean, I want to keep on moving this on because you do a lot of now and then comics. I mean, we're all in our 40s. Obviously, I'm 47, so I'm a 70s, 80s kid, and I assume you're the same.
Okay.
Is it because
I got a year on you?
Is it because we spend too much time on our kids? I mean, because your compare and contrast ones are really good, especially like the trick or treating,
Yeah, it is funny to think about like how very different. Like my parents, like I was the third of 3 kids, and my parents were all parented out by the time I came around. I was just like a little whoops-a-daisy, and my parents were, 2 and through, and here comes Bri, and they were like, oh shit. And they're like, okay, so basically the way I joke that the way I was raised was like a guest at like a B&B where they were like, okay, well, here's your bed, the fridge is downstairs, try and keep it down, and we'll be watching TV. So I was just this kind of free range kid who was just like, I'm gonna make fluff sandwiches for myself. They're, oh, that's good for you. Can you do that quietly? By all means. And if you're not familiar, it's originated in Massachusetts, and I think yes, it's basically marshmallow. It's like basically like soft marshmallow. It's just sugar. It's just like eating like a s'more on Wonder Bread without the chocolate. It's just a giant marshmallow. And I would make sandwiches of just sugar and Wonder Bread. And my parents were like, can you do that quietly? Then that's fine. And, like seat belts, I would sit up the little shelf behind the back seat where the speakers are. That was my car seat. We would go on long trips, and I would just lay up there and, read comic books and stare out the window. And that was fine. And, and it's the sort of thing like just this kind of, or I would just wander the neighborhood, at a very young age. And I was just going to, go out. And now, like as I'm older, part of it's kind of, the world we live in part, I think we're, maybe a little too scared. And part of it's just, maybe more attentive parenting and realizing that seatbelts are a good thing. And it was like, I don't know. So there's a lot of like just being at an age where I can look back at a very different time of parenting and think about like, God, like I would never do 90% of the stuff that my parents did the way they raised me. It's like, they weren't bad parents. It was just a very different time to grow up in like the, mid 70s or whatever. It's just like a very different mindset. My mom, I remember telling her my first kid, like, oh, he's driving me crazy. I don't know what to do. She's like, just throw him in a playpen and leave him be. It's like, I think social services would come though. I can't, it's like, just put him in a cage and go to the bar, drink it off, come back, like, put a bowl of water out for him or something. He'll be fine. He's 3 months already. You can't cuddle him forever. It's like, so just a very different mindset.
They used to use the colic mixture. I can't remember what it's called now, and it was basically alcohol, and that served the same purpose, I think, as Benadryl does today. I haven't seen any cartoon strips where you use Benadryl, or is that getting back to the darker strips?
I've thought about that. Where the thought has occurred to me to use Benadryl, and then I read the like, oh, don't and it's the sort of thing where like I've thought about it. Like there was like, here's an example of a cartoon that I've tried to think about, like, how could I frame this in a way? Like I remember, especially when I had a baby and I was literally losing my mind. Like I was just coming unhinged because I wasn't sleeping at all. And I was just, that's the sort of, the sort of thing they do to like POWs, you just keep somebody up for like weeks at a time and they'll absolutely lose their marbles. So I remember just going in my mind and the baby's just screaming and I'm just thinking irrational thoughts and like, oh my God. And I remember prior, like when I was leading up to having a baby, just reading a story about someone who threw a baby out a window. And I was just like, you threw a beautiful baby out a window? I'm like, and it just like mortified. I mean, justifiably mortified me. Like, that is insane. And then, I hadn't slept in weeks. I have this little car alarm just going off in my face 24/7, and I'm losing my mind. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I get it. I know why you were. I mean, I'm not going to, and I don't advocate that, but I totally get the throwing at the window thing now. Like I'm surprised when you're walking down the street, you don't see little babies popping out of windows left and right, just like, it's sort of thing, you bring an umbrella for fear of getting hit with babies being thrown out windows because they're fucking horrible. But, it's like, okay, how do you express that sentiment in a cartoon that you're not going to get hate mail? And it was like, D-like, boop, like just so. And for the record, I've, if anybody asks, I've never thrown a baby out a window.
I've never hit a wall just to sleep on the silver pillow, but yes, I mean, I've thought about it.
Yeah,
I mean, not in a serious way, but you do. You get into those additional states. I mean, we've all done it. But you said compare and contrast to the past, and you said your parents basically just let you roam free. I was one of 4. Brett, you were one of 3, right?
Yep.
Okay, and Keith, how many were you?
Yeah, I was one of 3. So. Okay,
do you just think it's because there were more children and therefore they could at least afford to lose a couple?
Get that farmer attitude, like, oh, we're just gonna have 9, and if we lose 3, we can still plow the fields.
Because my daughter is the most precious thing in the world, but she is an only, and I lament the days of being able to, roam the neighborhood and let my daughter do it. But I just couldn't bring myself to do that today. Now they dump them in a room and give them an iPhone. But that's something that you obviously think about. You think of the. Do you ever tell your kids though? You've got it so good. You just got it so good.
Yeah, like most parents of kids of a certain age, the kids are just kind of curious about like, what was it like when you were a kid? And I'll tell my kid, and of course like any good parent, I tell them how much better they have than I did, but in many ways they are so right. Or like my parents there was no like carting me around to like 8 different activities in a given week, like drum lessons and Boy Scouts and soccer practice and music lessons and whatever. And I'm like, no, my parents, they begrudgingly bought me a trumpet at one point, and then they didn't want to hear me practice because it was horrible. So they're like, no, you got it. I think you got it. There's no need to practice at home. You're fine. And then I just went to school and I practiced there. And that was about the extent of, my extracurricular activities is allowing me to own a trumpet that I only practiced elsewhere. But, they never took me anywhere. And like my whole week is just taking the kids to, dance and gymnastics and, drum lessons and Boy Scouts and everything else. So
I did want to talk to you about your cartoons because obviously I sent you one where you talked about what a president could be, and I obviously said to you, you want to revise that, and then obviously the batshit crazy dictator got revised in the very first strip in the new book. But the ones that more resonate with me, there was a one where you talk about eating your kids' food. I think it was you'd been the cake hero.
Yes.
How do you? But you're really fit and trim, and I'm a fat fucker, and most of my mates are fat fuckers. So how do you do it?
Well, it's mostly poverty and self-loathing. It's the sort of thing where I literally don't have a lot of money, so I'm like just worried about dying and death and whatever. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to try and eat well, but eating well costs a lot of money. So just by, like happenstance, like, okay, well, I'm going to try and eat well, but I can't eat a lot. So I'm just going to try and eat healthy. And I end up just I've always been kind of on the lean side anyways. And, it's like, I can't really afford to eat lavishly or go out to, eat the finest foods. And I'm a single guy now and I cook for myself and I can't cook. So I keep it as simple as possible. So there's no like, oh, I'm going to do this cheesy pasta, whatever type of thing. It's like, no, I'm going to get some chicken and get some broccoli. I can boil broccoli. I can, throw some chicken on the barbecue. And so just by happenstance, I happen to know how to cook the leaner foods and, so Yeah, that's my secret to health right there is poverty and ignorance, basically.
That sounds like a whole other book right there. That's
It does. It does. I have the problem is though is you're worshipped by SAHDs. You know, for example, you're currently earning $0 on this podcast. Hopefully that it expands beyond that. But do you think a collective of poor, time-starved dads is probably your best audience?
Maybe.
I mean,
you know,
you never think that maybe you should be writing writing for a more affluent audience?
You know, that would be. There are times where I've thought like, it's funny. Whenever I go to a Comic-Con, I can always pick out my fans out of the crowd because Comic-Cons tend to be a younger crowd. 16-year-old kids dressed like anime characters or whatever. And then the people that are kind of shuffling through the crowd that look like they haven't slept in days or whatever is kind of like slump up to the table like, oh God, I have $4. Can I bargain with you for a book here or something? So that's kind of my crowd. So yeah, my next book will be about I don't know, oil barons or something, and so I can get those people to buy my book and sponsor my comics or yeah.
The thing is, though, you have to have some sort of perspective there. Do you have any oil baron perspective?
I don't. I really don't. That's the hard thing is that like that. I wish I did. I wish I'm like, oh, well, being filthy wealthy, I can be, blah, blah, blah. But no, I write from, what I know, and what I know is being a poor dad.
We all can kind of relate to, there's a certain wealthy
You're married to a doctor. Come on.
A certain wealthy individual right now that I think you could get a lot of play time out of in any comic because he's almost comical in real life that there's not a whole lot more you could go and you would have like a field day. You think that lots of other billionaires would want to read about it.
Come on. They'll have somebody else read it to them.
Who cares as long as they're buying it? Who cares who's reading it?
All right, I want to get onto the conventions. You went to Home DadCon. How did that come about, and what did you think of Raleigh? Or did you just? I mean, you can be nice, or I could just edit it out later, because that's where Brett and I saw you, and you were floating around. We got to know who you were, but we'd seen your comics a lot. I mean, they're shared constantly because the things that you say, it's like, oh yeah, that's me, but you say it in a way that makes us feel good about ourselves. How did you enjoy Home DadCon? How did you get there in Raleigh?
Well, it was great. I just got an invitation to go, and I was like, oh, that sounds like fun, and they were willing to fly me out. So I'm like, okay, I love traveling, and so that was it. I'm a cheap date essentially. I'll go most anywhere if people are willing to get me there. But Raleigh itself, I found very, very wet because there was like a hurricane or something going on at the time. But the people there were great. It was awesome being around it was the only convention that I've ever been to that was specifically for parents, which was kind of cool. Like, I've done a couple of like library events or stuff like that, or book signings where I'm like, okay, well, these are all people that I can relate to. But when I go to comic conventions, it's, my people or my fans are definitely in the minority of that. It's mostly people who are there are into Spider-Man or the latest whatever sci-fi movie that's out, and there's a lot of crossover there. But the people that are like going somewhere with that's a convention for parents is kind of the exception of the rule. So that's the only one I've been to. So that was really cool just to be able to go to like. As a dad, just like, hey, we're going to go and we're going to talk about dad stuff, and just being able to be a participant, which was just kind of a cool thing to be. So
you were a celebrity there because we all knew who you were, and you floated around for a few days. I mean, did you get any material from that at all?
I'm trying to think if there's anything that came from that.
You don't have to admit it if you want to keep it to yourself.
I don't think I could be wrong, but I think it was more a shared I would happily cop to it if there was like, oh yeah, this one guy gave me inspiration for whatever. But I don't think there was any comics that directly came from that. It was more just therapy of just being around a lot of other people in the same shoes I was in. So that was kind of nice.
Okay, so this duck on page 79, The Struggle is Real, the arsehole that's Canadian, that's got nothing to do with Brett Roberts? That prick? He hasn't
No,
read it
that
yet. He's ordered it and it hasn't arrived yet. So
Yeah, that's all Brett actually.
Yeah,
okay, other than page 79, the whole thing was otherwise.
Okay, you were telling me in chat, and this is something I want the
Yeah.
guys to be able to hear, because this is a great story, that you do conventions, but you went to you have your regular convention. Obviously, you have Raleigh, which is a little bit sadder, and then you have Bulgaria, right?
Yes.
You want to tell us about Bulgaria?
Well, Bulgaria was kind of crazy. I got a email like welcome to Bulgaria, and immediately I'm like, and I just skipped over. I get so many emails, and I just kind of like scrolling through. I'm like, fuck you, Bulgaria, whatever, and just kind of like in the same way I'd be like, fuck you, Nigerian prince who wants to cut me in on his whatever. And I just assumed it was spam, and I'm like, nah. So, but then I'm like, I'm going through, and I was so close to just deleting it, and I'm like, Bulgaria. I'm like, well, that's new. That's a new one. Usually it's like Nigeria or whatever. I'm like, okay. I'm like, what's the scam here? And so I opened it up out of morbid curiosity. And as I'm reading the email, wow, they went through a lot of trouble. They've got some of my details, and wait, is this real? Is this actually from a real person? And so I started like Googling the convention, that they were like, oh no, we want you to come to an adventure con in Bulgaria, and it's from a real person that you could like really look up on the internet and whatever. I'm like, okay, so I wrote the back, and I'm like, yeah, tell me more. And I'm still waiting for the low price of you giving us thousands of dollars. And they're basically like, we will fly you here, we'll pay your way, we'll set you up, and you can come to Bulgaria. And I'm like, okay. So I further Googled where Bulgaria was, because I'm a stupid American who didn't know where Bulgaria was. So looked that up, and I'm like, okay, just kind of northeast of Greece. And I'm like, okay, and it seemed like a nice enough place. And so I'm like, okay, I'm in. So I went to Bulgaria of all places, and it was, for the most part, it was amazing, and everything there is so cheap. It's just like, for like a week, I was like, oh, this is what it's like to have money. This is amazing. Where you could go out and have like a salad and an appetizer and an amazing meal. Oh, and you have a shot with your salad, as is tradition there. So you get like a whiskey shot, or the Bulgarian whiskey, and then salad, appetizer, dinner, and then like a bottle of wine or two for like $15. And it was like, this is amazing. I was just like, oh my God, I can live like a king. And then, of course, I went to New York recently where, $15 for a single drink. But anyways, Bulgaria was amazing. And the people were so crazy hospitable. There was some kind of lost in translation moments where they asked me to do a panel. Me and my pal Nick, who does a comic called the Awkward Yeti and Heart and Brain, and they asked me up, and I'm like, oh well, Nick should come with me. He's bigger than I am, and it'd be kind of fun, two of us up there and whatever. And the guy beforehand, I'm like, well, what are you gonna ask me? What sort of stuff do you think we'll cover? And he's like, oh, and he kind of ran through like, where do you started, and how you get your ideas, and the standard sort of thing people are curious about. I'm like, okay, cool. So we talked for like a half an hour about all the things he was curious about. And so I'm like, all right, so okay, it's like 2:15. I go up, and there's like a good crowd of like I just for perspective, I was in the New York Comic Con I went recently, and there was like maybe 10 people in the crowd. Like there was like nobody came to the panel. I was up there. There was almost as many people on stage as there were in the crowd. It was really underattended. So I go to this, and there's probably like 100+ people in the crowd. So I'm like, wow, okay, this is kind of crazy. And so the announcer, the guy that I was talking to, just gets up there and is like, blah, 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 Brian Gordon, and then blah, 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 Nick Selleck, everybody. And so we're like, all right. So we go jogging up on stage, and he's off stage. And I'm like, okay, well, that's usually they're on stage with you. And I'm like, okay, well, that's fine. You can ask me questions off stage. So we get up there, and me and Nick are sharing a microphone. So I'm holding a microphone, and I'm just sitting there. And it's like, hi, and it's like wave and applause. I'm like, okay. And I'm just sitting there, and I'm waiting for a question, and there's no question. And so I'm just like, okay, are they? And I'm like, oh, maybe they're like they're having sound issues or something. I'm just gonna wait. I'm like, dude, and it was just like the 30 longest seconds of my life where I'm just like, there's 100 people looking at me, and not okay. So are we? And then finally, the guy's like, say something about yourself. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I'm Brian, and this is Nick, and I do this comic, and I've been doing it for yay long, and it's about parenting. So yeah,
And that was it. You said that there were some English speakers better than others, and
yes.
I mean, it was such a novelty. I don't think of Bulgaria as being equal opportunity parenting.
I don't honestly know that much about what it's like, with family life in Bulgaria. It seemed like the people that came up to me seemed not too dissimilar to any other parent I've met. It's basically just like tired parents coming up and saying like, oh, we love your comic and we think it's great and thank you for coming to Bulgaria. There was no real women do this or men do that, or I didn't. I mean, that may be the case, but if it was, I was ignorant to it. But yeah, but it was just really interesting.
Don't you find it a little ironic that you would actually have to go to Bulgaria to get a decent feed, like a previous Soviet country?
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. Where the funny thing was, like, I'm in Bulgaria. And I didn't know if anybody would know my stuff. And I sold like the 100 books I brought, which was cool. That was 100 more than I thought I would. And and I got very nice reception. Then we went out one night. It was actually my birthday. We did a pub tour for my birthday. It was just like everywhere we went, we were like the American celebrities, and we had like all our drinks bought for us, and it was just like, we're treated like royalty, and it was like, I love this country so much. And then just to come back to Kansas, and the reigning king is back, and and Kansas is just like, fuck you, like we know you, and I'm like, you're nothing, you're just the guy who lives in that little dumpy house, and I'm like, ugh.
They push past you to go to the what is it, the Steamboat Museum? I can't remember what it's called.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the Steamboat Museum. Yeah, they just shuffled off to get more barbecue and whatever, like, fuck you, duck guy. It's like, oh, but I draw a comic that's liked by lots and lots of people. I'm like, yeah, good for you. So yeah, there's very little respect or fame or anything here back in the States. But I was hot shit for like a good 3 days.
You were big in Bulgaria.
Hey man, some of us have never had the 3 days.
I bet you the groupies were awesome. I want green card.
Yeah, no. It was. Trust me, go to Bulgaria. It's a wonderful place. And you can you live very well on very little money. But the cold showers coming back to the States where everything costs way too much and everyone hates you again. So
sure. The thing I'm curious about as well is that you talked about something about, obviously, print media is dead. Okay, or at least what we think of being traditional print media, and the Calvin and Hobbes fame is dead. And I think you said something about, once how people would see the funnies on a weekend and then come and they would share the joke because everybody would read the same funnies. But that is the shared experience just online now? I mean, cartoons aren't dead, are they?
No, that's the crazy thing. And, like, knock on wood, they've been around for, hundreds of years, and I don't know what, 150 years or whatever it's been now. But people like easily digestible jokes with pictures. It's a lowbrow form of comedy, and it's not for everybody. I mean, it does require some level of reading, which a lot of people don't want to do. But enough people still read cartoons and still enjoy it. But yeah, it's digested in a very different way now. It's people post it on their, there's a certain psychology behind, shared humor, which is kind of like, you share a joke and it kind of becomes like you're telling a joke. Like, hey, everybody, here's my joke. And then people like the joke on your page. And then you feel like, hey, everybody likes my joke and, whatever. So that's kind of how it's shared now. It becomes like, if I read a joke about, blah, 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 kids are assholes. And Joe Schmo posts my cartoon and like, yeah, kids are assholes. Everybody's like, yeah, good one, Joe. It becomes kind of his joke to share. So it becomes this kind of, I don't know how to explain it, but it becomes like something that other people can kind of share through me, or I get to share through them, or whatever. It becomes, I don't know, kind of this weird shared experience that people can live or share with their friends and feel like, like, oh, they wrote a joke, whatever. So, but the unfortunate reality of that is there's not much money to it. It's all just likes. So I had a funny experience recently without getting too far into the weeds with this. My wife and I divorced earlier this year, and so I had to kind of start from scratch. So I'm like, okay, we weren't wealthy before, but now that I'm a single dad, like, I'm really not wealthy. So she got the house, I moved out, and so I'm like, okay, I have to refurnish my place all by myself. So I'm like, okay, so I was able to buy couch and a TV and whatever and a bed for me, and bunk beds for the kids, and then I started like, okay, we need something to eat off of. So I'm like, oh, so I started looking into dining room tables. And dining room tables just cost a lot of money, and I'm like, oh fuck. And so I started looking on like Craigslist, and I ended up buying a table for like $25, and I got ripped off. It was not worth the $25 I paid for it. So it was maybe a $5 table in hindsight now. So that's out in my garage currently. But so I'm like, oh fuck, I need something to eat. Like, I'm poor, but I don't want to sit on the floor to eat, for Christ. But I was driving home one day, and on the side of the road was this giant table with like a set of chairs. And it was like 2 blocks from my house. And it was like, holy shit. Like I prayed to the table gods, and, they dropped one of them. Like, so I go to the side, and I'm like, I'm being picky. Like, I have any, like, so I'm like trying the chairs out in the road. Like, oh, this is pretty comfortable. I'm like, oh, I can see feeding my children in this junk table. I'm like, and so I'm like, okay. So I'm like, so I put it in the back of my little SUV. And the table is like weighs like 600 pounds, but somehow I'm able to wedge it into the thing. And I'm like, it's sticking like 3/4 out the back of my car. And I'm like, okay, if I drive really slow and I, hook one arm behind me, I can kind of hold on to this thing. And the chairs are wedged in, and they're kind of holding the thing in there. So I get to the house, and I still have like 6 steps to go up to my, front door. And I'm like, fuck, how am I going to do this? And I see this guy down a couple of doors away. And I'm like, oh God, I need help. We've kind of waved like, hey, I'm new to the neighborhood, whatever. So I go over, and I'm like, hey, can I help? Hey, nice to meet you. I'm Brian. And he's like, I'm Kyle or whatever. I'm like, oh, nice to meet you. Hey, could you help me? He's like, oh, sure. So as we're going in, I start explaining who I am. And like, oh, what's his deal? And like, okay, he's a student. I'm like, oh, that's cool, whatever. He's an art student, it turns out. I'm like, oh, I'm an artist myself. And we go into it, and then I start telling him who I am. He's like, wait, I know your stuff. And I'm like, oh, yeah, thanks. He's like, well, you're big. And I'm like, oh, I don't know, it's popular. Like, wow. And he starts to be like, no, you're big. And I'm like, well, he's like, how many fans do you have? And I'm like, well, I don't know, combined about probably like, Facebook and probably like 1 million fans, I guess. He's like, holy shit, that's amazing. God, you're famous. You're huge. I'm like, oh, no. I'm like, oh, well, thank you so much. He's like, wow, that's just so impressive. I'm so wow. I'm like, oh, well, thanks. And it was just like this quiet moment. I'm like, yeah, so if you could help me lift my garbage table in the house, that would be now that the accolades are died off, I found this trash that I need to feed my children off of, and I'm like, there might be a raccoon underneath. We just scare him out real quick, and
we can eat him.
I listened to a podcast from Australia years ago. It was on the ABC, talking about people who dumpster dived and actually had better nutritional standards because the veggies to get thrown out first. You don't have any dumpster dive stories, the food that you actually put on the table by any chance, do you?
No, no, mostly it's from Costco. Mostly it's Costco. And not the dumpster, but actually from within
I was gonna
Costco.
say-
I don't mean to brag, but no.
Are you a member? How do you get to be a member?
Well, it has, my fame has some benefits,
You parlayed that into a free membership.
Yeah. No, not free. I mean, I still paid $50, but I like to think that, it's still a membership,
It's still exclusive.
Yeah, exactly. And they don't let anybody in.
Yeah,
I mean, you
just-
have to pay. I had to borrow $50 to make it happen.
Do you walk in the door and they go, "Oh, Mr. Brian Gordon, the free samples are this way"?
Yeah, absolutely. I just walk up down the aisle and just gonna. It's funny. The one and only time I ever got recognized ever was after my very first book came out. Andrew Scannell, who published my book, they happened to be here in Kansas City, so they have all sorts of crazy connections. So they called in all the favors, and I was on like 3 TV shows. I had like a full page of like just my face, like on the Kansas City Star, the newspaper. They had this big spread. I was on like NPR. It was like this media blitz of me. So for 1 week, it was like my 5 minutes. It was like Bulgaria and Kansas City for like 1 week. Like it was like Mr. Popularity. And so I was in Costco like that week with my kids, and I was in line, and the people in front of me were kind of giving me the stink eye, like, well, like, I'm like, what do you want to go? Like, what? I'm like, what are these people like giving me a dirty look for? And then finally the guy turned around. He's like, are you the duck guy? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, oh, she likes your stuff. And I'm like, oh, thanks. And kind of waved and whatever. And my son, it was just like this great moment where my son was there, and he was just like this moment of like, wow, my dad's famous. And it was like, oh yeah, this happens everywhere, kid, everywhere. And it hasn't happened since or before. But in that one moment, that one guy in Costco recognized me from like the morning TV show or something that I was on. So and so ends my fame. That was 2 years ago.
So moving on to some of the product, I mean, obviously you had Welcome to Parenting. You've now got The Struggle is Real. You've got the plushed animals that you did through a Kickstarter campaign. You've got a calendar coming out. I mean, what else is there for you going forward? What would you like to do?
Oh, well, I mean, one of the more lucrative things to do and one of the more fun things to do is a card game. So I'm currently looking into that.
This sounds like oatmeal, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he was the one who, his Exploding Kittens game that he did, that kind of like he was like, we're trying to raise $25,000, and he ended up raising like $18 bajillion for it. And it was just like, okay, we can make the cards out of gold now. And it was just insane. So, and a number of other people have had similar good experiences. And so I'm like, oh, maybe a card game would be, people seem to really like those. And, I like a good, silly card game. And we're looking at hopefully coffee mugs and beer and wine glasses, and tapping into the tired alcoholic is pretty much my demographic.
That's definitely sad. Tired alcoholics.
There you go. And then, I mean, I've done some shirts, but they, that you don't make a lot of money off of those, and those are they haven't sold terribly well for me. And then, oh God, what else? I would love to get into like just straight up children's books, like do like children's books that would be fun for kids, but maybe just edgy enough that the parents would enjoy it as well. I think that would be a lot of fun. So that's something that I've been thinking about, or maybe even like a baby book, like some sort of satirical baby book where, instead of it being the sappy bullshit that babies first, whatever, if doing something would be kind of funny, just about maybe, I don't know, recording all the horrible shit that happened or the funny, I don't know. It's something I've been playing around with. I don't know. I'm always trying to look some way to keep propagating the stuff and getting it stuff out there, because, I make, so little money as it is now. So, yeah, I'm constantly trying to figure out what new ways to feed my children and, earn a buck. So,
did you ever think of going animated, like an animated cartoon with these guys?
Absolutely. Have
you tried anything though?
Yeah, well, I had one offer of, and I could give you more well, I'm wondering how much I can say, but basically these people came to me and they had an offer, but they wanted it to star somebody who's an aging star of, say, 80 plus years. And they wanted it to be something for him as a voice actor.
Not William Shatner. Good grief.
Well, I'm not going to name names, but they had an 80 plus year old actor who they wanted, and they were like, well, what do you think? You were looking for a vehicle for him. And I'm like, there's the dad is like a 40 something. He's not 80. And they're like, well, he could have a wacky grandpa. And I'm like, okay. And then so we just started talking. And the more we talked, the less it seemed like we were maybe on the same page. And I started thinking like, okay, well, he's 80 and he could drop dead tomorrow. And then, if the whole thing hangs on that guy, then the wacky grandpa character that isn't in my comics. So I'm like, I just had to take a pass. And it's the sort of thing I would leap at the experience, but it would have to be something that would do it justice and, be done, like, I look at something like, Bob's Burgers or something as like the gold standard of like, oh yeah, that would be wonderful to have something that, kind of funny and real and like, yeah, that would be amazing to be able to work with somebody who could bring that sort of a sensibility to it, and not just, hey, we're looking for a wacky grandpa character for the remaining year of his life to have something to do. I'm like, so
you could do something yourself. I mean, I know there's so much opportunity just to do things at home. And I was just curious if you'd done anything that was yours that you just played around with. I mean,
it's a sort of thing where I did just with my next door neighbor, we did a short thing for the Kickstarter where he just used some software programs where it's kind of like a really low budget, sort of very primitive, like early South Park kind of level animation of my characters. And it was kind of a fun, like dipping a toe in the waters of just like, yeah, this could be something. I don't know. So, and I have taken like screenwriting, I have like a long since not used screenwriting certificate degree of sorts. So it's the sort of thing where like, yeah, it would be fun to sit down and see if I could write some, like a TV pilot or something and work with somebody. And I don't know. So yeah, that's definitely something I would love to.
Could it be like the anti-Daniel Tiger?
That would be wonderful. Yeah, just trying to do something that would be definitely for the parents. Like it's something that maybe the kids could watch, but definitely more skewed towards like the parents, because that's my audience. Every once in a while, I'll have people at conventions who will walk up and they're like, oh, cartoon, I'll get that for my 4-year-old or whatever. And I'm like, no, don't. Like, just, and I'm like, well, they probably can't read. But even, although I do have some, every once in a while people will come up and like, my 7-year-old loves your stuff, read both your books. And I was like, really? Is that appropriate? Like, I'm just imagining some like 8-year-old laying in his little bunk bed going like, yeah, fucking kids, right? It's like,
hey, look,
like,
big in Australia.
Yeah. Kids were the fucking worst. We are assholes. I mean, to be honest,
self-deprecating kids.
Yeah, exactly. There's some kid with smoking a cigarette and like, yeah, no shit.
Well, look, we've got to wrap it up. Brett is complaining that Canada's about to shut off the electric. We just do. We could
3 hours a day. That's all we're allowed.
We could talk to you all night and all day and not have to deal with our children, of course. Look, we got a show. We did a potion show. I did send you. There's a little meme, okay, and I just want to know which potion that you would drink. Did you happen to see that meme by any chance?
Yes, I did see that.
I'm curious because Brett chose the invisibility potion so he could get into the girls' lockers, but we won't get into that now. I was just curious of the stay young forever, breathe in the sea, become invisible anytime, $1 billion in cash and time travel. Which one would you choose?
As someone who's getting old and is falling apart rapidly, all my aches and pains, staying young seems like a good option. But then, as I sit here at my trash table, the idea of having $1 billion, I could buy a really nice dining room table with that money. So, and of course, most of it would go to charity and good causes, and
Oh yeah, and feed the children. I know.
But yeah, I'm gonna go with the cash. I'm gonna go with the cash just because that's, as I sit here at my garbage table. I think I need. It's like, oh, I'll stay young forever, and then watch my children die. I'm like, ugh. No, I don't want to. Watch them grow old, and no, that sounds like a horror show. So I'll take my $1 billion, grow old, and bury me in my gold coffin.
Okay, I think I owe Brett some money because he said that you become invisible because he says no one could resist a Porky's-like experience. Okay, so I'll be sending you one crisp dollar your way. Look, Brian, we're going to wrap it up. I'd like to thank our guest tonight, Mr. Brian Gordon. Thanks, mate. And look, if I really encourage people to go out there and buy his books because trash tables, no one should be eaten off a trash table. At least no one that isn't at college. Okay, thanks for joining us, Brian. I really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Okay, and obviously I'd like to thank Keith Johnson if he's still awake up there in New York. You still awake, Keith?
Yes, I am.
Okay, and Brett in the Great White North.
Oh, my pleasure.
Thanks so much.
All right, thanks, fellas.
Thank
and I'm sorry, I seem to have dragged you along on my journey. Anyway, follow us on Twitter at SAHDPod, like our Facebook page, subscribe to us via iTunes. Don't forget to give us a review of something. I don't know. I mean, we do a lot of anti-Trump, but that's not my fault. He's just an arsehole. Special thanks to Micah and Me for the use of the rather excellent Super Daddy Fun Day. And as always, everybody have a Super Daddy Fun Day.
It's just another ordinary typical day. Me and my daddy gonna go out and play. I hope my baby sister doesn't